Dr. Dana Tassone here with participants in HFT4295 discussing Chapter 10. So far, what we've done is we've discussed management knowledge in the first part, and then in the second part, we discussed management functions, and all of these terms may have been familiar to you, but we gained a little bit more practical information about those. And now, if we take the management knowledge coupled with the management functions, we put those together, and now we get some very practical tools for us to use in the practice of professional management. And this is something that it's what makes the difference between being a successful manager or just being a manager. If you ask a manager in our industry, any sector, theme parks, attractions, entertainment, health, facilities, clubs, lodging, food service, you ask any manager what business he or she is in, I would guess that he or she would give you a host of any answer, with the exception of the one answer that is apparently true in the field of professional management, and that is that managers are in the business of diagnosis and interventions. You diagnose situations and you produce interventions based on those diagnoses. And that is how you enhance an operation. And we talked about earlier, very early on, we talked about there are three important tactical strategies for us to use in the practice of management. One being a run strategy, that's productivity based, that's value added management. Two being a growth tactical strategy, that's when you expand or enhance an operation or a number of stores in an operation. And then three is a troubleshooting or fix type of strategy. When we know how to do each of those three things, we become very, very powerful managers. And that's why we've worked up until this point to give you the practical opportunities to understand tactical strategies. And what do we mean when we say tactical strategy? We mean that it's not done, if you were in a business program, you would be looking at case studies and you would be asked to solve the problems presented in those case studies from an executive point of view. And that's all well and good, but I don't think that point of view serves us now. What serves us now is basically focusing on an operation, whether it be to enhance productivity in an operation, or to grow an operation, or to troubleshoot or fix an operation. Those are the three things we do, and that is why we call them tactical strategies. And then later on in our careers, we get to the executive level, and we still do the same thing. We find that we're doing the same thing. We're just doing it for a division or a corporation, a broader range of operations. And it doesn't matter what sector of the business we're in, it's all the same. It's all about diagnosis, and that means observation, data collection, and interventions. And that means doing something with the data that we collect. And it's not research. I'm talking about looking with an experienced eye at an operation, identifying those things that work very well, those things that work pretty well, those things that could work a lot better, and then from those we determine what interventions we as managers will take. You remember when we talked early on about VAM, value-added management, we talked about how it's enhancing productivity in little steps every day to enhance profitability. So it's not enough to just open the doors, run your operation, turn on your terminals, hope that your staff shows up, and then just do things as they come along. That's called reactive management, by the way. Proactive management is when we go into the operation and we know what types of things we want to do to make that operation better. And that's what a run strategy is all about. That's the difference between a manager who makes larger bucks than the managers who make smaller bucks. And as you know, if you can tell somebody in a job interview or a promotion interview what you would do to enhance productivity in the operation, you're an ace. You're a winner right there. And part of that problem, of course, when you diagnose, what do? You look for things that are right and things that are not so right. So that's why we call it diagnosis. And that infers problem solving, which we've already talked about, but now we put it into practice. And so there's a figure 10.1 called system investigation, and we talk about identifying problems, symptoms. We already know that the things that are obvious to us we think are problems, but oftentimes they're just symptoms of a real problem that lies beneath the surface. And then from a productivity standpoint, does the problem or symptom lie in the input portion of the transaction or in the transaction process of the system? So is it to the left of the system, people, materials, resources, finance, technology, or is it something that happens in the way we use those things to generate our services, our products? And it doesn't matter what sector you're in. And so we look at those two aspects. We look at, okay, what's feeding into the transformation process, and then how is the transformation process working? And we say to ourselves, what is the real problem? How can we, and remember, in a run strategy, it's not that there are problems, it's there are opportunities, challenges to do things better. And I give you a lot of examples of that in the chapter, and then I give you a hierarchy or a process for systems analysis, and that's in figure 10.2. And in that, we're looking at what's the obvious problem, the symptoms, symptom categories, real problems, solution alternatives, because you can't always use the best solution, and then alternatives analysis and feasibility. That's what tells us what we should do in terms of making something that already is better in the case of a run strategy. And then you get another picture, and I've done work with clubs and resorts and hotels and restaurants where their managers had no idea that this landscape existed, that nobody ever taught them, regardless if they were trained in hospitality programs or business programs or the arts or the sciences. Nobody trained them to map out productivity or production, for that matter. And we found out simply by working with those managers that they would get a huge aha. Oh yeah, this is the picture, and that's why these pictures are important pictures to keep in mind when you're in the actual workplace. Some of you are already managing operations, and you get. And then you heard me talk about early on. We talked about the critical path method. So let's say we come up with we've done our diagnosis, and we've determined our intervention, what we're going to do, the steps we're going to take to do this intervention, and then we put those steps into a calendar. Let's say it's weeks, and we would have our strategies or steps 1, 2, 3, whatever, and we would determine how long those weeks would work. And some of them would be contingent on the prior step, and many of them could be done at the same time. And that's why the CPM, the critical path method, is such an important tool to have. And then, what I've learned when working with managers in these various operations is when it really came down to it, is they didn't have a visual picture of what production is. Well, how can you enhance productivity if you don't know what production is? And I gave you the basic model of maintenance, repairs, delivery, and production, all housed within the hub of around the hub of service transaction systems, activities, and then we go on to identify the organizational structure and responsibilities of a large lodging facility. Many of you, I know from our discussions, work in these kinds of places. And we identify the executive committee and identify the functions within those divisions. And then we go on to talk about what each of those divisions does. And you already know what we've discussed about having interrelations with in terms of communications and those types of things. But this identifies the specific responsibilities for each of those functions. So when you look at the chief engineer at a property, you say to yourself, this tells you, well, now I know what that person really does. And so we walk you through the various divisions and in that particular type of operation. And then we map out the production system for various things. One example is given to you in figure 10.8, which shows for example, a restaurant production system. Those of you, many of you are working in restaurant settings. If you look at that system, you'll see that that's exactly what you're doing. Nobody knows that's what you're doing because nobody mapped it out. But when you look at the map, you say, oh yeah, that's exactly what I do. And then we present you with recreation production systems, and human factors associated with production systems. Remember the model. You have inputs, transformation process, outcomes, which are measured, that creates revenue and guest satisfaction, and that's measured in quality and quantity. And what are the circles around it? You have the meaning system, the culture, and the learning system underneath that. And that is the behavioral impetus for getting people to perform at their best. And so that brings together what we're talking about in terms of running an operation and making it a little bit better every day. And when you look at the pictures behind that, you look at the pictures that describe that, we find that you understand that very, very well. We're out of time.